Hello and welcome to the 2021 capstone event for the Project Jupyter Internship. I am going to ask Jay to go ahead and share the slides, please. Wonderful. Thank you, Jay. So we're excited to share with you a little bit about the program at California Polytechnic State University in San Luis Obispo. That's a really long name, and so we call it Cal Poly for short. We're really excited to be here today, and I'm thrilled to have the task of introducing the phenomenal work that was undertaken by this summer's cohort. This summer, more than ever, our program was facilitated and made possible by a community of mentors and collaborators, but I did want to start by introducing the Cal Poly team, and that is founder Brian Granger, operations coordinator Christine Moon, and myself, Anna Ruvalcaba. I'm the director of our program on campus. Also, before we continue, next slide, please. I do want to acknowledge that our program would not be possible without the generous funding provided by various foundations. These are past grants and current funding for our group. We have the Leona M. and Harry B. Charitable Trust. We also have the Alfred P. Sloan Foundation, Schmidt Futures, and the Gordon and Betty Moore Foundation. So on the agenda for today, what will we be covering? So first, we'll start with an overview of the program by Brian, who I will introduce in just a moment here. I will also then introduce, or we will have two presentations by two different teams. And we have a third team who is going to be presenting their JupyterLab extension tomorrow at 9 a.m. Pacific time. And Christine, if you can drop the link into the chat now, in case people haven't had a chance to register for that, you can there's still time to do that. And so I will now turn the presentation over to Brian Granger, who is co-founder of Project Jupyter, professor at Cal Poly, principal technical program manager at Amazon Web Services, and as I mentioned, the founder of this internship program. Next slide, please. And then Brian, go ahead and take over.
Fantastic. Thank you, Anna. Welcome, everyone. Glad you can all join us today. The dream here with this internship program, as the slide says, is to solve real-world problems for Jupyter users that somehow improves their experience of using Jupyter and the work that they're doing with Jupyter. And the how of that is that we combine software engineering and UX design into a single internship with the goal that each team of developers and designers ships software by the end of the summer. You can go to next slide, switch. So this internship is currently affiliated with Cal Poly. It actually started all the way back in 2005 when I was at Santa Clara University, and we've been running it in various forms ever since then. Our first intern ever was Min Reagan Kelly when he was an undergrad at Santa Clara University, and he is the lead and founder of Jupyter Hub, which many of you are likely familiar with, and continues to work with us today as a researcher at Simula Research Labs in Norway. So this has been going on a long time. We've learned a lot over the years, and we're still learning a lot. It's a full-time internship for students over the summer. They often stick with us after the summer, working part-time during the academic year. The big thing we've learned is how we structure teams. And so the last few years that we've been running this, we hire students and put them in teams of 3, where each team has 2 software engineers and 1 UX designer. And we found this team approach works really well to get the teams thinking through and going through the process of human-centered design, diving deep into the users of Jupyter, the tasks that they're doing, what their pain points are, and how they can build something that improves their work and experience of using Jupyter. One thing that's new for this year is that we've leveraged mentors from the broader Jupyter community. Previously, we had people at Cal Poly mentoring students, and this year we've opened that up to include a wider range of people who are mentoring the 3 teams. And with that, let me thank and acknowledge the mentors for the 2 projects that we'll be hearing from today. The first extension and team is the commenting project, and the mentors for that are from the University of Michigan. This is Professor Chris Brooks, and then Adam Patterson and April Wang have also been doing a lot of work with the students as well. On the second extension and team, the to-do list and notification project from 2 Sigma, there's Ashton Darian, who's one of the co-founders of JupyterLab and has been a long-time contributor. And then from Google, UX designer Cameron Olson. And Cameron himself was a former intern at Cal Poly and did a lot of the initial UX design of JupyterLab as a student. And then we've also had other Jupyter contributors who've held office hours to answer additional questions the students have had. Zach Saylor, who is currently a software engineer at Apple and also a former intern in this program. Stephen Sylvester, who is a software engineer at Apple, and then Kevin Johns, who's been working a lot on the JupyterLab real-time collaboration and is the creator of YJS, which is a fantastic CRDT implementation that we're using in JupyterLab. With that, I think we're ready for the presentations. And Anna, do you want to introduce the first team?
Yes. So before we switch over to the first team of students, I do want to provide a couple of logistical reminders. So there's 2 places that you can interact with us. One of them is on the chat. That's just kind of for general questions, technical issues, that sort of a thing. If you want to ask questions of the students who are presenting, we ask you to use the question and answer section. So students will present and have some time at the very end for your questions. So I would like to go ahead and turn it over to the JupyterLab Commenting extension team, and I'll just go ahead and have the students introduce themselves and share screen. So go ahead.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining in on our presentation today. Today, we'll be going over our work on JupyterLab comments. First things first, we'll go around and introduce ourselves. That being said, my name is Vuppala, and I'm a rising junior studying computer science at Cal Poly Slow. And I contribute as a developer to the team.
I'm Cameron Toy. I'm a rising senior at Cal Poly Slow. I'm a computer engineering student, and I'm also a developer.
I'm Rahul Nair. I'm a rising sophomore at Cal Poly Slow. I'm also a computer science major, and I was also one of the developers. Chloe was one of the designers of our team. She's a rising senior at Cal Poly Slow who is unfortunately unable to be here. So to get a bit of a background information on our extension, we need to talk a bit about JupyterLab's new RTC, or real-time collaboration features, which was recently released in the new JupyterLab 3.1 update. It essentially allows multiple users to collaborate on one session, and it's using these new collaborative tools which we leverage to make our extension.
Why comments? Comments as a medium for communication is a staple across many collaborative applications, like Google Docs, Figma, or Microsoft Word. And with the advent of RTC in JupyterLab, comments have been incredibly desirable, ranking 10th out of 33 from a recent pain point survey conducted by the core Jupyter team. As you can see, it's ranked 10th. This centralized medium allows for both technical and non-technical users to collaborate, to provide feedback and suggestions. The defined structure of the interface circumvents the problem of cluttering the source file. Also, since this is a native JupyterLab extension, the workflow has less resistance, since it's well integrated and doesn't require any third-party applications like Git or GitHub. Now let's go ahead and start talking about the core features of our extension. A major goal we achieved was creating a platform for any file to have commenting within JupyterLab. While we provide text file and notebook support out of the box, we also provide an API-like interface for other developers to create custom implementations of commenting that is best suited for them. As you can see in this GIF, you can see an interaction play out between two users across different files within a single session, adding in comments and replies. Another key feature of our extension is the flexibility of expressing a comment or reply. In this example, you can see raw markdown typed into the left and having it rendered out in the right. We also have the capability of rendering raw HTML up above and LaTeX down below.
We also wanted to prioritize a bit of a familiar interface when we actually made the comments so that the ambiguity and confusion new users may face is reduced to a minimum. So as you can see, the design of the comment is quite similar to those of, say, a Google Docs comment or those in Microsoft Word or Figma or any other commenting application. We also wanted to add a bit of a unique twist to it. You see, Chloe made those abstract moon icons, which are tied into the whole Jupyter moons concept. And we have quote text akin to that of a block quote in HTML.
All right, it's now time for a demo. So you all see JupyterLab. You guys can't respond, but all right. For this demo, we're going to be working in this data science document. This is a graph of the Hodgkin-Huxley equations, which are basically used to model ion concentrations in heart cells. And so the first thing I want to do here is open up the comments panel on the right side. And I can see that Srirag already has a comment here, but the first thing I'm going to do is change my name up here. So JupyterLab assigns you an anonymous identity based on the moons of Jupyter. I'm going to change that to my actual name, so it's a little easier to follow along. And okay, so he has a comment here. He says, the graph seems to be wrong. Can you check if everything's working? So as I click on the comment here, it scrolls me to the target of the comment, which in this case is a notebook cell. And I can see, okay, yes, this looks a little bit wrong. Looking at the code here, this seems fine. And then I see that the equations originally come from this HH Python file. So I'm going to switch over to the Python file, and you can see on the right here that the current document being commented on changes. So comments are specific to each document. And then as I'm going through here, I see, okay, this looks wrong. So I'm going to leave a comment and say, current should be for the first 1 second, not 5 seconds. And I'm going to submit that. It's like a little bit of an issue there. The current should be okay, I think we're having some issues, and I close this out. Okay, so it just wasn't displaying correctly. All right, now I'm going to go back here and have this comment say the issue was with the current timing. Comment. Okay, so now I'm going to come back here, and Srirag said, okay, let's ask Rahul. Rahul is going to provide some feedback. And I actually just noticed a typo with my comment here, so you can edit it using the context menu. And you can see that I said it's for the first second, but it should actually be milliseconds. So I'm going to put strike through there. I'm just going to delete this right here. And resubmit the comment. Okay, so Rahul agrees. And that's how we would address an issue while collaborating with JupyterLab Comments. So now I'm going to go through a few more features of the commenting extension. You can see here when I click on the comment, it scrolls me to the target of the comment, the text. And that's because the comments are aware of where they are in the document, basically. And if I leave a comment before this, like this, before, then it will be before this comment because it's later in the text. And if I leave the comment like here, for example, the comment will be later in the text. So after. You can also leave comments using the context menu like this. And as you saw before, comments support markdown, HTML, and LaTeX. One thing you also might notice is that if I make a change to the comments here, like deleting this comment, the dirty status indicator comes up here showing that there was a change to the comment file. Comment files are linked to their source file. So if, for example, I go here and save the original Python file, it'll also save the comments file. Comment files will also automatically save if you switch documents or refresh the page. Finally, I'm going to show you what it looks like in dark mode. And then I'm going to hand you back over to Srirag.
Thanks for that demo, Cameron. If you'd like to learn more or track our progress, feel free to check out our GitHub. Also, go ahead and click on the star or watch button on our GitHub to receive more updates on the project. Also, if you would like to try this extension out locally, you can install the pip release that we have out. That being said, we'll also add in the binder link for the demo if you would like to just go onto the binder right now and play around with it. Quick disclaimer, our extension isn't perfect, so feel free to add in any issues to our GitHub if you find any bugs. Thank you.
So as for our development, the first few weeks was just getting set up. We had a few prototypes set up, but we were mainly getting familiarized with the JupyterLab API, libraries, code practices, and the sort, such that by week 6, for example, we were able to get text selection comments and cell level comments for notebooks. We revamped our UI just to make it more like what we have it right now. And overall, we started adding some new quality of life features like the editable comments you saw and the capacity average text. And now by release, we've expanded our support for comments, not just from notebooks, but as you saw, to Python files, text files, markdown files, you name it. And this is also where we just started piling on the features. There's the collapsible replies if your reply chain is too long. There's the sidebar header you saw with the dirty bit, the refresh button, the save button. And from a coding perspective, we also refactored it a bit. So it'll be easier to integrate and it's a bit more compartmentalized.
Okay, so now I'll talk a bit about the technical implementation and some technical notes. So we use YJS for the real-time comments and collaboration. YJS is the real-time collaboration library that's used natively by JupyterLab, and we found it really easy to use and really helpful. We also used React widgets wrapped in Lumino for the UI and the actual comment widgets. So for those of you that don't know, Lumino is the front-end library that was designed by Project Jupyter for Jupyter projects, and using React with Lumino let us really quickly iterate the UI while also staying tightly tied into JupyterLab. Files are stored in JSON on disk. They're stored server-side. Right now, they're stored in a comments folder in the root where you start JupyterLab, but we're looking into making that user configurable. Also, comments are extensible and file type agnostic. So you saw comments for Markdown or used for a Python file and for a notebook because we've used the API that we defined to create this implementation for text files and notebook files. But the API is extensible and it gives you the tools to implement comments for things like CSV files or image files and things like that. It lets you, the API defines how you would add a comment and also lets you define your own type of comment, like for a selection of an image or something like that. And now into the future of the extension. The first thing we'd like is permissions and a user identity system. So you saw that I had to change my name from the anonymous moon name to my actual name. So currently JupyterLab doesn't implement a permissions or user identity system. So we have a little hacky stand-in for that. Another thing that you'll notice if you're on the binder right now is that you can edit or delete anyone's comment. So we'd like some sort of permission system. And once that's natively in JupyterLab, we can tighten our extension. Another thing that we'd like to work on is where the comments are stored. So right now they're stored in comments JSON files. And there's some kind of odd moments of friction that causes with the serialization and deserialization, finding the targets, switching between documents, things like that. So something like an SQLite server-side comment database really helps smooth these interactions out. And then the last thing we like to do is integrate comments in a core JupyterLab. We're looking into drafting an official proposal for that. So if you have any ideas or things you'd like to see in comments before the prior JupyterLab, either leave an issue on our GitHub or look out for that proposal in the coming months. So we also like to give a quick shout out to the people who helped us with this extension. Our mentors, Dr. Christopher Brooks and Adam Patterson at University of Michigan, Kevin Jans with YJS, Dr. Brian Granger and Anna Rubalcaba at Jupyter Cal Poly internship program. And then finally, the wider Jupyter community as a whole. You guys were all really helpful on Gitter and GitHub, and couldn't have done it without you. And thank you. Finally, we'll be taking comments in the chat and questions in the Q&A. Yeah, and if you have any other questions after this, you can leave them on GitHub. Okay, I'm gonna look for the Q&A first.
All right, I guess we can go off addressing the questions in the Q&A. I'll take the first one by Richa. When you export a notebook, will the comments come with it? Right now, no, but there is a potential in the future regarding, because like a big question that we had was like the scope of our extension, whether it's only going to be a JupyterLab extension or like a Jupyter Notebook extension. So that is something that's in the works and it's definitely doable.
Jonathan Frederick asks, do you write end-to-end tests for this feature? If so, how? It seems like writing end-to-end tests is rather complex. You see multiple users interacting with one notebook. Yes, it is very complex. We don't have end-to-end tests. We don't have UI tests or real-time collaboration tests, which are things we'd actually like to include before this becomes a part of core. I know that there's been some UI testing frameworks that have been in use in JupyterLab, like Galetta. Yeah, so we'd like to use those as well. Declan Kelly, is there a way to navigate from the comment on the right sidebar to the location in the source code? Yes, yes. I don't know if you saw in the extension. If you click on the comment, it'll navigate you to where the source of the comment is, or the target of the comment. Adam Rule says, really great to see comments coming JupyterLab and across file types. Do you think people use comments on markdown cells as well as code cells? Yes, I think there are some uses for using markdown comments on markdown cells as well as code cells. You can comment on markdown cells. I don't think we showed it in the demo, but you can also comment on a text selection in a notebook cell. We talked to some people and they really wanted to see that. So yeah, you can comment on text selections in markdown cells as well as code cells. And in the chat, I think we have a few questions too. Okay. When is a comment really a discussion, and does this matter in what we should do in JupyterLab? Chris Brooks. When is a comment really a discussion, and does this matter in what we should do in JupyterLab? Okay, so my interpretation of that question is, for comments that are more than just a quick note or a suggestion, how does this extension address that? Am I right in that?
Yeah, so sometimes people review something and leave a couple of comments and there's little responses, and sometimes it's like a deep discussion about a design change. Think about an issue in GitHub and how that can, lots of discussion can happen with very minimal amount of code and work. So how should we think about that in the context of something like what you guys have built?
I think in a larger discussion, you want some idea of threading and replying to a specific reply. So we don't implement threading, although we are planning to eventually implement adding other users or pinging other users using the notification system that is in the following presentation. But yeah, that is something we've thought about. Right now, I feel like the commenting extension best addresses the cases where you have a quick suggestion or a quick note and you need a little bit of back and forth. But yes, there are situations when a discussion is more appropriate and threads or other features might be useful. What happens to comments in cells when a cell is deleted or when the content that the comment is anchored to is changed? So when the content is changed, if you have a text selection and you change the text before or in the selection, it updates live. So text selections are flexible. When you delete a cell that a comment is attached to, I believe it also disposes of the comment in the JSON, but I might be incorrect.
I'll address Philip's question that was put in the chat. I feel like if we had Chloe here, she would be able to go dig deeper into the design process and the help that we got from Christopher Brooks or all of the other people in the community. There has been an extensive amount of user testing done that Chloe kind of led. And we have basically validated some of our design choices and the way we're structuring our comments visually or many of those types of things. We do have a Figma doc that we might link to our GitHub. We might link in our GitHub, but there has been some fair amount of design discussion happening and happened too. So
another thing we considered was JupyterLab is inherently a multi-document environment. You can have two documents next to each other, whereas in something like Google Drive, you have one document always in focus. So it's not as problematic if you have a comment like popping over the interface, because it'll never intercept another document. But in JupyterLab, we really wanted to keep the comments in that side panel in like their own container, because it can kind of cause issues if there are multiple documents. Feel free to leave any bugs you find also on our GitHub. We know there's a few bugs in there and we're waiting for people to discover them. We'll be storing in comment JSON files. Okay, so right now in JSON files, it stores, there's a generic kind of comment that's stored for every type of comment. Like you have a cell comment and like a text selection comment. And for every comment, you store the identity of the user, the time that the comment was made, the text of the comment. And then you have this idea of like a target, like a JSON target that's specific to the type of comment. And then also a list of replies. Is there a public schema that you create for comments in Jupyter? Yes, there is a base comment JSON object, and then there's an API for defining a different type of comment, basically. So, and generally what that means is defining a target, like what the JSON representation of the target of that comment looks like, and also defining a few methods like how to find the HTML element to scroll to and things like that. We're coming out with some documentation by the end of the week, where we'll not only talk a little bit about how to use the comment, how to use the extension within JupyterLab, but also how to extend it and develop for it.
and I think it is important to mention that like all of the work that we started with was kind of based off of the W3C model for just commenting. So there's a fair bit of familiarity with other commenting systems.
Rahul, I'll let you take the next question from Chris.
So Chris wrote in chat, what if JupyterLab RTC had a live video and voice channel going on at the same time? Would commenting still be useful? Would it need to change to be awesome? I believe yes, commenting would still be useful. There's would be different purposes for having a comment as opposed to say a live discussion. You could have stuff happen asynchronously during with comments as opposed to having something talking like at once during a discussion.
Comments are not currently searchable. That is a good feature though. That is a good idea. Yeah, they're currently not filterable or searchable.
If you check our issues, I believe we do have in the works like a global commenting hub essentially in the works, where you would be able to like tag certain comments, have like adding cell tags to a comment or making like a proper searching mechanism as well. So I feel like that would happen eventually, but we don't have it right now.
Yeah, so yeah, we had an idea of like a comment hub, which is you could search the comments in all your documents. And we figured that things like tagging and searching would be more useful if you could go through all your documents and look at all the comments. And that's another issue that like an SQLite database would address, because you wouldn't have to parse all the JSON files on disk. You could just have this one SQLite database instance. If that's all the comments, then I think that's it for us. Yeah, if you find any issues or you have any comments, please feel free to leave an issue on the GitHub. And, thank you.
Yay. Thanks, team. Thank you, Cameron. Thank you, Rahul. Thank you, Srirag. Great work. If I can have you post in the chat. There you go. Thank you. You read my mind. I was going to ask you to post a link to your repo there. So thank you for sharing your summer's work. We will now move on to the next team. Though just a quick reminder that you can put questions in the Q&A while students are presenting, but they won't look at them until the end in order to answer them. You can mix them into the chat also, but it's a little more confusing for us. So if you can put it into the Q&A, that helps us manage all of the questions. So without further ado, I'm not sure which one of those it is. I will go ahead and let the JupyterLab notifications and to-do list team introduce themselves.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to our capstone presentation. We are a Just Do It team, and today we will be telling you about 2 extensions that we worked on over the summer. And please feel free to post your questions to Q&A section. So we're a project Jupyter Summer Intern team, and it's our first time contributing to open source. My name is Andriy, and I'm a software engineering senior at Cal Poly.
I'm Harshit, and I'm a master's student at Cal Poly, majoring in computer science.
And I'm Marissa. I'm a graphic design senior at Cal Poly.
So today we will tell you about 2 extensions we worked on. It's a to-do list extension. We will look at the initial proposal for this extension and our progress in this extension. Then we will look at the notifications extension, breadth of UX research done for this extension, and we will demo design prototypes and extensions itself. Last but not least, we will talk about the next steps that we envision for each of these extensions. So, to-do list. The goal of this extension is to provide ability for user to create simple file-based to-do lists that support real-time collaboration inside JupyterLab. Features are Jupyter readable file format, ability to create nested tasks, spatial persistence of items and completion, and ability to use to-do.txt file/markup format for file storage and rehydration into user interface. Current status is finalizing design direction and deciding which file format to use. A bit more about it later.
So in the beginning of our internship, I conducted user interviews with some of our JupyterLab users and found that if users want to create a to-do list, they would need to use alternative options such as the classic pen and paper, Jupyter text files, or third-party service. This does, however, force users to jump between various platforms, resulting in wasted time and system resources just to keep their work organized. And platforms such as Trello and Asana are deemed too complex by users, and they feel that such features are unnecessary whenever they want to look for a simple way to organize their tasks. And these platforms don't integrate well with JupyterLab's commenting system, notification center, and can't be stored as files alongside the Jupyter notebook files. So during my interviews, I created some user personas. So here's example 1. I'm just going to highlight from this slide the things that we've learned most. So what most users want in a to-do list is basically structure. They want to be able to nest subtasks, and which is why in our model, we followed a task to subtask model. Here are some screens of our earliest Figma iteration. As you can tell, we do have the nesting implementation down. We have the ability for customization for color, due date, time, as well as the ability to put in these number tags. This basically is like partial completion, just to let users know how far they are through their to-do list. And then here's just an example of a screen of our latest Figma. We don't really have time to go through each prototype, so I'm just going to highlight what we have done here, which is basically moved our completed items to the bottom to keep it away from the main area. we still have implementation of subtasks, top level tasks. There are due dates and also the number tags as well.
So this is the earliest version of our extension. On the right-hand side, you can see that we just support creation of top-level tasks and nested tasks, ability to complete each of those levels. No integration with file system yet here. Let's go to the next slide. So this is the latest version of our extension. You can see here that the interface is updated on the right-hand side. We see a number of uncompleted subtasks on each task. We also can see a completed section at the bottom right-hand side of the screen. And the key difference here is that we added support of parsing of to-do.txt file format. So currently in the center of the screen, to-do.txt file is opened. User can edit this file however he wants using to-do.txt format, and then user can parse this file into the extension UI. So I'd like to add that at this stage that we thought is almost final stage, we understood that there is a conundrum between to-do.txt file format and the URL format with nested subtasks that we want to use, and it makes us either need to change the UI or abandon to-do.txt file format. So please note that this extension is still at early alpha stages, and we need to make this decision. So if you would want to download this extension, you probably just want to do that in the case if you're interested in contributing to the development. Yes, so let's go to the next slide.
So as for the potential next steps for the to-do list extension, we want to decide what path we want to go down on, and if we want to stick with the to-do.txt format, or we want to develop our own parser, so we can add support for nested lists instead of having to make a different file for every list that you want to have. We want to add the ability for UI changes to reflect in the files and vice versa. So whenever a change is made to either the file or the UI, it reflects in the counterpart as well. We want to add due dates and partial completion of items to do items, and the ability to assign items to collaborators, although that will come as there is a more concrete concept of user identity in JupyterLab. So moving on to the notifications extension. The aim of the notifications extension was to provide an API for extension developers that they can use to send out notifications to users that are connected to a collaborative JupyterLab session. Currently, the extension features system notifications and toast notifications, and we have a REST server-side architecture with a WebSocket feature. And basically, what the extension developers can do is create notification objects using our well-defined API schema that we publicly provide, and use tokens to send out notifications and retrieve notifications from the server side that has a SQLite database for storage. And we will talk about that in detail later. We also have an integrated notification center widget inside JupyterLab so that it can gather notifications and display them in one place. And currently we're preparing for Jupyter Core integration, and Marissa would talk about the UX review.
Yes, so during the interview process, again, we found that users find notifications as annoyances because they don't want to be constantly reminded of trivial updates. However, without a notification system in place, there's no way for users to be aware of updates from the app, which is why our whole model is to try to find a painless and seamless way to integrate toast notifications as well as a notification center. So here's another user persona, just highlights from this slide. They really want to find notifications that are deemed really important and top level, and be able to have the ability to customize their own preferences to say if they want to dismiss or block certain notifications from constantly popping up. So based from our research, we found 4 main solutions. One of them is to create a notification center. 2 is to have a server-side architecture. 3, we're going to be able to group our notifications. We're going to do this based on subject and not on origin. I'll talk about that later. And as well as implementing a blocking system, again, allowing users to customize their own preferences. So here are some screens from the earliest iteration of our Figma. Again, each notification has their own notification cards. There's the ability for users to dismiss or really not to show certain types of notifications. Like I mentioned before, these notifications are grouped based on their origin and not really subject. And we found later on that that was something that users would probably not like. And here is our blocking panel, just basically to allow users to customize preferences, like I mentioned before. So quickly, I'm going to run through the Figma prototype. This is our latest iteration. So if I was to restart it, supposedly a user would get toast notifications in the top right. That's just because it's relation to where the center is. If I open this up, it opens a open drawer side panel. Here are all of our notifications. They are labeled by new and earlier. If I just hover over this, I can dismiss it easily. Say if I want to open up this group of notifications, these are grouped by the notebook file itself, and all these notifications are related to this notebook file. If I just want to get rid of it, I can. If I hover here, you can see that there's like a cog icon that opens up our blocking panel, or the preference panel basically. So I'm just going to dismiss this, close this up. And we also have the ability for users to clear or to like close certain sections, not really to get rid of all the information. If the user feels like there's so much clutter here, they can just close this section just right here. If they want to reopen it, they can. Or if they really just want to get rid of all earlier notifications, they can just do this right here. I'm just going to quickly show you our blocked panel that I've shown in our first iteration. This allows users just to turn on and off notifications that they deem like too much, such as like cell execution or even commenting if they so want to.
So this is a very early version of the development version of the notification extension. We were kind of in our exploratory phase, and as you can see, we were tracking events inside JupyterLab and like a notebook that were happening and populating the side panel with cards according to the action that has just occurred. But we didn't have like a lot of like UI elements, and like this was all just like based on a local session. And if you can go on to the next slide, we can see how the extension looks like as it is right now.
So here you can see the latest version of our extension. It has toast notifications, it has updated UI, and also a large amount of work was done that is not seen here, such as defining and adding server-client architecture, defining open API specification for our API. Let's go to the next slide to talk about it in detail. So we have defined our API accordingly to open API specification and published the specification on GitHub, so it's publicly available, and other extension developers can use it and extend it. It also defines API and shapes of the objects that API expects to accept, and it allows us to auto-generate server tests and documentation for our API. Let's look how our extension looks in browser.
Yeah, so I can go ahead and share my screen. And I have a collaborative JupyterLab session running on my machine, and I have two different browsers open to emulate two different users that can be connected to a collaborative user space. When a user logs into a workspace for the first time, they're prompted to enter a username. As the previous comments team mentioned, there is no concept of user identity in JupyterLab as of now. So this is just a temporary placeholder, and it stores a username in local storage. But as there is a more concrete concept of user identity, we would like to move to that system. But for now, I can go ahead and enter my username for this browser window and do the same for this browser window. And as you can see, whenever a user connects to a workspace, every user that is already connected gets a notification that another user has just connected to your collaborative workspace. And they also get that notification in the notification center. When you connect to a JupyterLab workspace for the first time, a user also gets the last 20 notifications that were stored in the database. And that ensures that every new user that joins the workspace can feel like, can know what was going on inside the workspace before they were a part of it. And talking about the server-side architecture and how the notifications actually work. So we have a REST server architecture defined with REST endpoints that extension developers can use to post notification objects to as per as our API schema. We also have a WebSocket architecture, and every user is connected as a listener to the WebSocket. And whenever a notification object is posted to our SQLite database on the server, a WebSocket event is triggered, and every listener is prompted to make a GET request using the token that we provide that we will discuss later. And they make a GET request and retrieve the last notification object from the database, and that is populated inside the UI. And we're currently tracking cell executions and new users joining. So if I were to execute this cell, you could see that like that event happened and both the users got this notification that this cell has finished execution in the demo book 2.ipynb. And Andri can talk more about the token and the UI elements that we have.
So for extension authors to use the notification API in a familiar and comfortable manner, we provide a token, which is a thin wrapper around our endpoints. So extension developers can import it, instantiate it, and use methods on it, pass notification objects to these methods instead of hitting up endpoints directly. So let's talk about the user interface now. As you can see, user interface is built around interactive cards that are based around the certain subject, the source of notification, such as a notebook. If more than one notification comes from the same source, they are bunched together and a number of notifications in bunch is displayed. We can click and extend any bunch, so you can see individual notifications. You can see that the cards itself are interactive and they show creation time and day. If you mouse over them, they show interactive control elements, X with which you can dismiss this particular notification, and cog to open settings. So in terms of settings, currently we have ability to block notifications from certain origin, and when if user does it, you don't see notifications from that origin. Harsh will demo it in more detail.
Yeah, so if I choose to block notifications from cell executions, I can go ahead and do that, and I get a toast notification as a warning prompt that tells me that I will no longer be notified for updates about cell execution. I also have a button for settings in the toast notifications that I can use to open the settings panel, and that shows me what notification sources I have currently blocked. So since this user has blocked notifications from cell execution, and for this user, there is nothing in the block notifications list, if I were to go ahead and execute a cell on either of the notebooks, this user gets notified about that cell execution, but this user doesn't. As a user, they also have the ability to remove stuff from the block notifications list. So I can go ahead and remove cell execution from here. And if I were to execute a cell now, both these users will get the notifications as usual. So if you can go back to the slides, I can talk about the potential next steps for this extension. So as an immediate next step, we would like to use the incoming concept of user identity in JupyterLab that we've mentioned and enable filtering of notifications so that only recipients who are meant to get a notification are sent out those notifications. We want to update our UI and provide options for personalized customization of notifications and expand on our toast notification functionality. And we want to make it so that our extension more closely adheres to JupyterLab core practices so that we can prepare for JupyterLab core integration.
So we would like to do a special mention of our mentors. It's Cameron Olsen, our UX UI mentor, and Ev Shandarian, our software development mentor. They put a lot of time into our team and into this extension and help to move it as far as it would move. Thank you very much. And thank you, everyone. Thank you for attending our presentation. We're opening floor for questions now. Let's look what's up in Q&A. We will probably ask Brian to answer the first question if he would like to.
Which question here is this?
Philip's question in the Q&A.
How is this problem chosen initially? Yeah, so we go through a process of brainstorming different project possibilities, and then we score each of those ideas based on a number of different dimensions. including both impact on users, technical and design complexity. And there we were looking for projects that are not too simple, but also not too complex, impact on the students who will be participating in it, and then also interest from mentors. We want people to mentor on projects that they're interested in. And so, yeah, there was a fairly long process and sort of iteration, discussion, scoring that we went through to pick the projects.
Yeah, I think we have a question from Chris about like competing with GitHub issues and how does our extension differ from that? And I think Marissa would be the best person to answer that if she would like to.
The to-do list extension was more of just a native extension for JupyterLab users and to integrate well into the ecosystem of JupyterLab. It's not really meant to compete with other well, there is a little competition between like other third-party platforms, but this was meant more of for like a native platform to-do extension for users, because we've noticed that a lot of users do use just regular text files in JupyterLab. So we just wanted to create an extension it helps users more instead of using other platforms to switch between different versions or different to-do lists.
So I'd like to add to this that an important thing for us, which led for some problems for us, was we wanted to use a to-do TXT, a popular to-do list format, already widely adopted and used on the internet as a backup file format, and have on-the-go integration with it. So yeah, simple to-do list that supports already existing open source encoding, not necessarily like a competing thing with GitHub issues.
If there are any more questions, I think the Q&A section would be the best place to ask them. If not, I think we can like talk about the same things that like the comments team said, and like we can link our extensions in the chat. And we would really appreciate it if you could like take a look, and if you find anything that you would like to contribute on like or help with, like you can add it to the issues, and that would be it. And I can add the extension to I can add the link to the extension to the chat.
Yeah, so thank you, team. I think we will go ahead and wrap up. It doesn't look like there's any more questions. So congratulations to Marissa, to Harshit, to Andre for your summer's work. It's really excellent to see the final presentation and summary of what you've been able to do over the past 11 weeks. The students gave links to their repos. I will also post a link for everyone to the Jupyter Cal Poly GitHub, which has everyone's extensions or repos in that area. I also want to give a general Project Jupyter resource that I don't feel like everyone is aware of. That's our discourse channel. So lots of good content and discussions happening within that area. So I wanted to share that today. With that, I think we will go ahead and wrap up. I really want to thank everyone for joining us. It's been a joy to share our work with you from the summer, and we're looking forward to tomorrow's presentation from our third team, the Jupyter Bifrost team.